Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome today to this race preview for the 2021 Mexico City Grand Prix, which of course gets underway in 3 hours from now. And it's going to be, given the starting grid you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's going to be a very, very good Grand Prix without a doubt. The fight for victory and the podium, it's going to go on until the very end. And even the battle for the, front of the midfield between Gasly, Sainz, Ricciardo, Leclerc, possibly Norris coming through. Going to be a very good battle there. And even the rest of the positions between Vettel, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Alonso, possibly a Williams, we'll have to see. And of course, you've got Ocon, Stroll, and Tsunoda towards the back as well. So we are going to have today, I think, a very good Grand Prix. We could possibly have the best Mexican race at this track that we've had since we returned in 2015. The races here have been decent, and there's been a couple that have been, good. Maybe not pretty good or great, but, just good. I reckon today's race could be a great race, and given how good the last Grand Prix was 2 weeks ago at the Circuit of Americas, I think we are in for another very good and, as we'll get into in a moment, very close battle for victory at the very front. Hopefully you guys, by the way, are doing well on what is a very cold early Sunday evening for me, and hopefully no matter what time it is in your part of the world, no matter what's happened, hopefully you're having the best day you could possibly be having at the moment. Now, before we get into the teams, let's first get into the results of qualifying, and then I'll read out what the starting grid is, because of course there's been plenty of penalties that have been applied after qualifying for new power units and gearboxes. So these were the results. Valtteri Bottas quickest and on pole position for the 2021 Mexico City Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton second, Max Verstappen third, and then Perez fourth, Gasly fifth, and then you had Sainz in sixth, Ricciardo seventh, Leclerc eighth, Tsunoda ninth, he will start in 17th, Norris 10th, he will start in 18th, and then Vettel 11th, Raikkonen 12th, Russell 13th, Giovinazzi 14th, Ocon 15th, Alonso in 16th, Latifi 17th, Schumacher 18th, Mazepin 19th, and Stroll 20th. Now, was it Stroll, Ocon, Russell, Norris, and Tsunoda all have penalties for, Tsunoda, Norris, Ocon, and who's the other one? Stroll. They have penalties for new power unit elements. George Russell only has a 5-place penalty, for a new gearbox. So on the left-hand side, of course, you can see the starting grid, but I'll read it out anyway for anyone who can't quite see it. So it is Bottas on pole from Hamilton second, Verstappen third, Perez fourth, Gasly fifth, Carlos Sainz in sixth, Ricciardo seventh, Charles Leclerc eighth, Sebastian Vettel ninth, Kimi Raikkonen 10th, Antonio Giovinazzi 11th, Alonso 12th, Latifi 13th, Schumacher 14th, Mazepin 15th, and then Russell 16th, Tsunoda 17th, Norris 18th, Ocon 19th, and Lance Stroll in 20th place. That is the starting grid for the moment. We'll see if there's any more penalties between now and the start of the race. Hopefully there is not, and I don't think there will be, because there's not anyone who is starting way out of position that may as well take a new gearbox or power unit. There's no real point, I think, for anyone else who hasn't took a penalty yet to take a penalty. But I think that will be most likely the starting grid for the Grand Prix later on. But now let's get into all the teams and the respective battles they will be going ahead with today. And of course, we'll start at the front of the grid and start with Mercedes-Benz, who got possibly their best qualifying result of the season. I mean, a 1-2, of course, that's the best you can do in qualifying. But given what we saw in practice and the history of Red Bull around this circuit, I don't think anybody really thought, I don't even think Mercedes thought that they would be able to get a front row at this circuit. I thought that maybe, and I think Mercedes maybe thought that at best they could get someone on the front row, but even that looked as though it was going to be a struggle. But to get a front row lockout, and I actually think given that Bottas is ahead of Hamilton, I think that's actually a benefit to Lewis Hamilton not being on pole here, and I'll get onto that in just a moment. But like I said, I think in yesterday's stream, getting a 1-2 on or at a track where Red Bull have been so good and so dominant in the last few years, it's almost like an away victory in a football match, you know, where one big team goes to another big team and the away team isn't expected to get the win, but if they do get it, then they, you know, it massively helps their title bid for a certain league or whatever, or competition. Kind of feels that way Mercedes so far. I do have to emphasize so far, because in the race, Red Bull can still win, and they still got Red Bull very good pace, and I think Red Bull will most likely have the best race pace today, because I think the Red Bull car, aerodynamically speaking, is a lot stronger than the Mercedes, so they'll be able to keep up, I think, Red Bull in the corners. The only problem is Red Bull, for Red Bull, is that they won't be able probably to overtake unless they have a lot more pace coming off the final corner down the pit straight, or even in that little straight with DRS between turn 3 and 4. But yeah, for Mercedes today, and Lewis Hamilton most importantly, when looking at, of course, the Drivers' World Championship battle, like I said, I actually think it's better that he's starting second, because if he was starting on pole position, even if he gets a great start, he would then be giving everybody a tow down to turn 1, and that's of course not what he would want to do to maintain a good track position. So it actually works out better for Hamilton, because, and I'm sure Mercedes have even already talked about it with the drivers in whatever, you know, race briefing they have, that the ideal situation, if they can try and make it happen, is for Bottas to get a better start than Hamilton, pull ahead of Hamilton, let Hamilton get the slipstream, and then at the last second, pull out and try and go around the outside or down the inside, get the move done, and then Bottas can then hold up the Red Bulls behind and allow Lewis Hamilton then to build a gap. So when they get to the pit stops, Lewis Hamilton is under no massive threat from the Red Bulls. That is what Mercedes need to do today if they are going to win the race. They need to somehow orchestrate a move on that first lap where Bottas, like I said, gets the better start off the line, but then gives Hamilton a great tow down to turn 1, and Hamilton then, hopefully from his and Mercedes' perspective, they can then sail into the lead, and if Bottas then maintains second, then of course he will block Verstappen and Perez behind. Saying that, you know, Bottas blocking Verstappen and Perez, Bottas has actually been consistently this weekend quicker than Lewis Hamilton, so even if that does happen, you know, Hamilton gets into the slipstream on the first lap and gets past, I don't think Bottas is going to be dropped massively by Lewis Hamilton, unless of course Valtteri Bottas deliberately slows down a bit to allow Hamilton to pull away, then, you know, that could happen. But Bottas has had good pace this weekend, so like I said, it won't be easy for the Red Bulls to overtake. But if that happens, Hamilton gets into the lead and Bottas gets second on that first lap and is second at the end of the first lap, then if Hamilton can build a 4 to 5 second gap to Bottas and the two Red Bulls by the time they get to the pit stop phase, then Lewis Hamilton, if that does happen, is in a very, very, very good position to win the race. Say 75-80% chance at that point. But if Hamilton was to, say, get into the lead on the first lap, but Max Verstappen was also able to find his way past Valtteri Bottas, then I would say it's 50-50 in terms of the race win between Hamilton and Verstappen going to the end of the race. But Mercedes have got to orchestrate things absolutely on that first lap and the run down to turn 1, because if they get it right, it could win them the race right there. It really, really could, because we've seen how hard it is to overtake at this circuit. Even though we have the long straight, it is quite hard to overtake here. And also the slipstream effect down to turn 1 on the first lap is so great that they need to make sure Lewis Hamilton gets a good advantage from that. And like I said, if that type of strategy, getting Hamilton to the lead with Bottas second and then Hamilton building the gap when they get to the pit stop phase, the only pit stop phase we think for the Grand Prix, then Lewis Hamilton should win the race. I mean, Max Verstappen will still have a chance, but it should be a Hamilton victory if that's what goes down. But of course, you never know what's going to happen on the first lap. We've seen plenty of crazy first laps here in Mexico. Contact between, I think, Vettel and Verstappen in 2017. Of course, the last time we were here, Hamilton and Verstappen made contact and went across the grass. And that led to Verstappen then having a poor Grand Prix. And somehow, Lewis Hamilton actually won the Grand Prix from there, which I'm still not quite sure how he did that. But it's hard to say at the moment, given the starting grid, and without, of course, knowing what's going to happen on the first lap. It's hard to say right now who is the favourite to win out of Hamilton and Verstappen. I still think the fight for victory is between those two. I still think, for Valtteri Bottas, if required, he will jump out of the way of his teammate, and the same for Perez if Perez ever gets into the position of getting in the lead of the race. So like I said, I think it is between Hamilton and Verstappen, and right now, given their starting positions, like I said, I'd have to say 50-50. But if Hamilton gets that great start and gets into the lead with his teammate bringing up the rear and covering for him, then he has a very, very good chance of what would be a massive win in his bid to become the first ever 8-time world champion. Now, for Red Bull, qualifying yesterday did not go as expected. Now, I know people will say, or blame Yuki Tsunoda for why Red Bull qualified third and fourth. Now, I think Red Bull would have improved their lap times if that didn't happen. Tsunoda going offline. I think he was trying to get out of the way of other cars because he knew he had a penalty and he wasn't trying to go any quicker. And I think he had earlier on that lap provided a tow to his teammate Gasly, and that's why Gasly, of course, is starting the race from P5 because that did help Gasly a lot. But I think, like I said, I think Tsunoda was trying to get out of the way, but in doing so, kicked up dirt and put it on the racing line. Perez then suffered because of that, and then I think Verstappen also suffered with a bit less grip on that racing line going through, turn 11, turn 12, but also was distracted. So I do think the Red Bulls could have definitely improved their lap times, but I don't think we are in a position to say that Red Bull would have got pole position had it not been for Yuki Tsunoda, because we don't have the evidence, I think, from Q3 primarily to say Red Bull would have got pole if it wasn't for Yuki Tsunoda, because Mercedes' first runs in Q3, gotta remember, they were very good, and Bottas, he got pole by quite a bit compared to Max Verstappen. He was 3.5 tenths quicker, and that's a lot of time to make up around quite a short lap. So I don't think Verstappen would have got pole. Maybe at the absolute most he would have got into second place, but I don't think he would have got pole position, and I think probably would have ended up starting where he's going to be starting the Grand Prix from today. So I don't think it really made the difference in terms of would Red Bull have got pole position or not. I think ultimately Red Bull just lacked the speed that Mercedes had at the end of qualifying. Now, in this race, despite what happened in qualifying, Red Bull can still absolutely win the Grand Prix. And like I said, I think they will have the superior race pace today because we've seen it all weekend. They have a lot more grip than Mercedes have. Their car's a lot more stable through the middle sector, meaning that I think Red Bull will be able to keep up with Mercedes in the middle sector. The only problem is, if they are behind Mercedes down that pit straight, then I don't see how they're going to pass them down the pit straight, because the Mercedes is so quick down the straights here, and we've seen that for the last few Grand Prix, really since the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. So I think Red Bull will have the better race pace. It's just whether in the big moments, whether things will go their way, such as can Max Verstappen get ahead of at least one of the Mercedes cars on the first lap. That is the biggest thing I think for today's race. Even if Hamilton is in the lead at the end of lap 1, if Max can get into second, then game on. Max Verstappen can absolutely win the race from there, because like I said, should have the pace to keep up with Hamilton, should have the pace to be right behind Hamilton for really the first stint of the race. And then when we get to the pit stops, wouldn't be surprised at all if Red Bull could find their way past with an undercut or possibly an overcut, depending on, of course, how Hamilton, how his pit stop goes, whether he comes out in traffic or whatever. So that's the most important thing. Max Verstappen getting into at least second place. If he's in third, with, say, Hamilton in first at the end of lap 1, and if Hamilton has good pace in that first stint of the race, I think Max Verstappen's in trouble in terms of getting the victory. I still think he'll, say if that does happen, he's behind Bottas or, you know, behind both Mercedes in general at the end of lap 1. I still think he can get second, but just getting, you know, past both Mercedes will be tough. It will be very tough. It'll probably require great pit work and an overtake rather than just great pit work to get the job done there. So that first lap is crucial. The first lap could very well decide the race win today and, of course, have a massive effect on the World Championship. And, of course, there is a possibility of contact between Hamilton and Verstappen. Like I said, 2 years ago, they collided at turn 2. It wasn't a big collision, but it definitely affected Max Verstappen's race in a negative way. Hopefully that doesn't happen. What I want to see is really what we saw at the US Grand Prix, a battle to the very end between the two best drivers in the world. That's what we want to see today. And hopefully that's what we get. But because of the way those first few corners are, it is possible. It is possible contact on the first lap. But hopefully it doesn't happen. And like I said, the first lap is absolutely crucial. But I'll just quickly, before we get into the midfield teams and how I think they'll get on in their respective battles and how they're looking pace-wise, I will just quickly give my podium prediction for the Grand Prix today. So I'm going to go for Lewis Hamilton to win the race today, from Verstappen second, and then Bottas third and Perez fourth. The reason is, like I said, I think Bottas will, most importantly, provide that toe to Hamilton on the first lap. Hamilton will get past and will be leading at the end of the first lap. Bottas will be in second, and then he will hold up the two Red Bulls. Hamilton will build enough of a gap to be safe enough to the Red Bulls. Max Verstappen at some point will get his way past the Finn. I don't know how, whether it be an overtake or in the pits. I don't know how he will get it done, but at some point he will get it done, because we know Max Verstappen is easily quick enough over 71 laps to get past Valtteri Bottas in what is a very quick still Red Bull car. But I think by the time he gets past Bottas, I think it'll be too late really to mount a serious challenge to Lewis Hamilton for the victory of the Grand Prix. So I think, yeah, Hamilton will get the win. Verstappen second, Bottas third, Perez fourth. Like I said, the first lap, that is the lap that will decide, I think, really, what goes down at the end of the Grand Prix in terms of who finishes on the podium. I mean, you could argue a lot of the time in Formula 1 that's the case, but I think especially here, because of the long run down to turn 1, it is so, so important. Now let's get into the midfield and how I think they'll get on. So McLaren, Daniel Ricciardo, P7 on the grid. That's a pretty good starting position for Ricciardo, considering McLaren have not been that great this weekend. This has been one of their weakest weekends, really. They've not looked that competitive. Ricciardo has looked a lot better, say, this weekend compared to what he was earlier in the season, which is a good thing. Good to see that Daniel Ricciardo is keeping up that improved form. And really, since he got his win at Monza, he has been a lot better, of course, bringing the confidence through from that. And P7 is a good starting position to split the Ferraris around a circuit where Ferrari should be much quicker is a very good result. And I think if Ricciardo can stay within a second of Sainz at any point in the Grand Prix, he should be able to mount a challenge to Carlos Sainz's position, because the McLaren is still probably the quickest car down the straights in Formula 1 right now. And of course, that's why they won the Italian Grand Prix and got a 1-2 finish. And remember as well, Ricciardo 2 years ago at this Grand Prix was probably one of the best drivers. He didn't have a great qualifying, but came through in the race and had a really good performance. And I think finished in, was it 7th or 8th place? And he did a really long stint on the hard compound tyre, I think, to start with. So Ricciardo had a very good Grand Prix here 2 years ago. And of course, the year before that, in 2018, he started this race on pole position. So I'm expecting a good drive from Ricciardo today. And I think Ricciardo will finish in the top 6. I think he'll get that. I think he'll probably be able to find his way past Gasly, who I think Gasly, despite him starting 5th, I think that is definitely benefited from the tow that Tsunoda gave him in Q3. And I think Gasly and AlphaTauri won't be able to maintain the pace that McLaren and Ferrari should have in this Grand Prix. So I think Ricciardo will get a top 6, and I think that would be a pretty good result around here where McLaren have not been that strong. Lando Norris, I think because, like I said, it's not that easy to overtake here, because the McLaren isn't exactly as quick as it has been at other points this season, I think he will find it tough to come through and finish in the points. He probably will finish in the points, but he'll be, say, 10th, maybe 9th at the absolute best, because he will lose a lot of time in traffic. Be very surprised if he can get any higher than P9, to be honest, in this Grand Prix. But he'll be, I think, around 10th and 11th, and his main rivals for points have to be Tsunoda, given Tsunoda's pace so far this weekend, and also Sebastian Vettel, who is starting in 9th. I think that's probably his main rivals for a points finish today. Now we'll move on to their main rivals in the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari. And even though Ferrari are not starting in, say, the best positions they would have been hoping for coming out of practice and into qualifying, they would have been hoping for at least one car, say, up in, around 5th place. And instead it's 6th and 8th. For the two Ferraris there. Even though that's not as good as what they were expecting, compared to McLaren, it is of course better. And if it did finish the race as the starting grid is right now, they would be scoring, 12 points? McLaren scoring 6. So Ferrari would actually overtake McLaren in the battle for 3rd. So it's still, a pretty decent starting position. Tough to say whether Ferrari will get, say, 5th or 6th with both cars. I think Carlos Sainz, I think he will finish in 5th place, because I know in qualifying, I think he even said this in qualifying, he wasn't actually looking that great and he didn't really have that much confidence during the session. But if you look at practice, Carlos Sainz was consistently better than Charles Leclerc and has been in the past here pretty strong at this circuit. So I think Carlos Sainz in the race should consistently over 71 laps have the pace to finish a P5, and that's where I think he'll finish. Charles Leclerc hasn't looked that great this weekend, and I have to say with Charles Leclerc, I mean, he's had a good season, but it's not been as good as I expected. And I know people might be shocked at me saying that and may think, well, he started on pole twice. He didn't start on pole twice. He got 2 pole positions. He only started one of those poles, starting the race. And I know people may say, well, he could have won the British Grand Prix. True. But I think where I'm disappointed with him slightly is that, and I do rate Carlos Sainz, but I thought Charles Leclerc would stamp his authority in this rivalry and show that he is definitely the number 1 at Ferrari. But even though Charles Leclerc is ahead of Carlos Sainz in the Drivers' Championship, it's been very close, really, between the between the two drivers all season long. I mean, Charles Leclerc is only 5.5 points ahead, I think, of Carlos Sainz. Yeah, he is. It's not actually been as dominant as I thought it would be. Like I said, it's not been a bad season. It's not been a season where Charles Leclerc's been poor or anything. And yeah, he has had some very good performances this season. The last Grand Prix at Kota, he was very good. Turkey, he was very good. What other Grand Prix? Silverstone, of course, he should have won that Grand Prix. He really should have, and was robbed by reliability trouble in the end. But like I said, I thought he would have done better compared to Carlos Sainz. And I think Carlos Sainz has proven to be a very good driver this season. And I think it's proven himself that he can compete at the upper echelons of the grid on a consistent basis. I think he has proved that, but I just thought Charles Leclerc would be just that little bit better. But he hasn't quite. So, yeah, and as well, this weekend, I think Leclerc's been quite disappointing as well. So, yeah, I think Leclerc probably finish around 7th or 8th. It will depend on how he gets on compared to Gasly. That's really, I would say, his main rival. Because with Ricciardo, I don't think Leclerc will be able to pass him because Ricciardo will be too quick down the straights. So I think, yeah, Leclerc and Gasly will be the main battle for, Charles Leclerc. Like I said, with AlphaTauri, I'll get into them in a few moments' time. I don't think AlphaTauri will be as quick as they were in qualifying and will drop back. So, like I said, I think Sainz probably finishing in 5th with Ricciardo in 6th and Charles Leclerc either 7th or 8th. But really, he needs to be finishing in the top 7 here in Mexico. Now, let's go on to Aston Martin, who didn't have a good session. Sebastian Vettel in practice actually looked pretty good, but then in qualifying was just nowhere near it. He really was, and had a poor session compared to what he was like in practice. But because of the penalties, he now has a good starting position of P9, and of course he will have, he will have fresher tyres than the 8 cars ahead of him. It won't be, a lot fresher, only 2 or 3 laps, but it does make a difference, even though it will be a small difference. And I think Vettel, he should be able to get into the points, I think, in this race. Should be quicker than the 2 Alfa Romeos. Also, the 2 Alfa Romeos are not that quick down the straights, so I don't think Alfa Romeo will exactly be, hunting Sebastian Vettel down in that aspect. The Alpines look pretty slow, so I don't think Alonso will really be that big of a deal for Sebastian Vettel in this race. And I think Sebastian Vettel, his main fight today is Tsunoda and Norris, like I said earlier on when I was talking about McLaren. If they do get close to him, then those are the 2 he will have to keep off if he wants to finish in the points. Because like I said, I think he will have the pace to beat Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Alonso, and of course the Williamses, and even Ocon and his teammates. So I think Vettel probably will finish around 8th and 9th. I mean, if there's a retirement in the top 8 on the grid, then maybe he can get 8th. But yeah, around 8th and 9th, I think is where Sebastian Vettel will finish, and I think he will have the pace to do that. So yeah, I think Sebastian Vettel will be fine. And for Lance Stroll, I can already tell what strategy he's going to be going for. He'll be starting on the hard tyre, most likely, and going as long into the Grand Prix as he can. But I don't think it will end up in a points finish for him unless he gets a safety car at the right time, because Aston Martin aren't quite that quick to come from the back of the grid with Stroll into the top 10. Now, with AlphaTauri, great qualifying for Gasly, but at the end of the day, it was benefited a lot by Yuki Tsunoda providing a slipstream, and I think Gasly will drop back behind Sainz, Ricciardo, and Leclerc in this Grand Prix. Still, though, as long as they outscore Alpine, which I think they most likely will in this Grand Prix, that's all that matters, because they're only, let me just have a quick look. I think they're, 12 points behind Alpine in the battle for 5th? Let me just look. No, 10 points behind. So even if Gasly was to finish in 8th place, that's 4 points took off that gap, and it would make things very close going into the next Grand Prix, where AlphaTauri should be, again, quicker than the Alpines. So as long as Gasly finishes in the top 8, I think that's all that matters, really. If he can't keep up with the Ferraris and the McLaren of Ricciardo, I don't think that's that big of a deal. If he can, though, finish any higher than 8th, of course, that would be great. But like I said, if he can't keep up with the Ferraris and the McLaren of Ricciardo, it's not exactly a big deal, because those 2 cars and teams have been definitely superior to everyone else in the midfield this season. And for Tsunoda, he's had good pace this weekend, Tsunoda. He's been very, very consistent as well with that pace. Was a bit stupid in what he did at the end of qualifying, I have to say. But I think in the race today, I don't think he'll get a point because I think Norris will have the pace over him, but I think he'll be very close, very, very close. I think the lowest you'll see him finish today is probably 12th, but I could see him definitely, say, 11th and only, a second or less than a second away from finishing in the points. I think he'll be that close to a points finish today. And of course, any retirements in the top 10, that would help him massively and help AlphaTauri, of course, in their battle to finish 5th in the Constructors. And their battle against, of course, this team Alpine. I won't really talk that much about Alpine. They're really, really slow. Alonso 12th. That's only because of the penalties. And Ocon 19th. They'll have to hope for retirements and a high rate of, reliability failures, especially for, any type of result that would be classed as decent or or good. So yeah, Alpine very, very slow, and I have to say it is surprising because I would have thought around this type of circuit Alpine would have not been up in the top 7, top 8 on the grid, but definitely would have been in the top 10. But they've been really poor. They were 15th and 16th, as you saw in the qualifying results yesterday. So yeah, they were very, very poor. Were Alpine. Alfa Romeo have actually been, comfortably quicker than Alpine so far this weekend. Good to see, and also good to see they're starting in 10th and 11th. That's a very good starting position. I think as a team, that's their best qualifying as a team with both cars they've had this season, and probably since 2019, to be honest. I don't, though, think they'll be able to come through and get a point because I just don't think Alfa Romeo are strong enough to do it. And I think Norris and Tsunoda, like I said, will be quick enough to find their way through them at some point during the Grand Prix. It would be nice if Alfa Romeo got a points finish, of course, for Kimi Räikkönen, who is very close now to retirement. He's only got, 5 races left until he hangs up the gloves and the boots. But, Alfa Romeo, it's possible. It definitely is possible if, say, luck goes their way and certain cars retire from the Grand Prix, but if Norris and Tsunoda come through as quickly as I think they can, then I think the Alphas ultimately just won't have the pace to get in the points, but nice to see them in a good starting position. And finally, it's Williams, Latifi 13th, Russell 16th, and to be honest, Russell was actually a lot quicker than Williams really actually were in qualifying trim. I think Russell got a lot more out of the car than was actually there, to be honest. And yeah, Williams 13th and 16th is a starting position for both cars that is definitely way higher than it should be. They are the second slowest team this weekend. So Williams, no chance of a points finish, and they'll need a lot of luck if they are to get into the top 10. But guys, that has been it for this race preview. And thank you guys for coming along to the this race preview. And don't forget, guys, I will be live in 2 hours from now for the race watch along for the 2021 Mexico City Grand Prix. And hopefully I'll be live with a certain Australian who will be joining, hopefully, the stream in a couple hours. And don't forget to join us for that. It's going to be a great Grand Prix. And as well, don't forget I will be doing a race reaction as soon as possible after the race has finished. So don't forget to come along to that as well after the race is finished. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or just go to my channel page and do it there. Whilst you're there, hit the notifications bell, smash the like button, share this video, and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description for more content like this. But guys, until my race watch along for the Mexico City Grand Prix, which will be, like I said, in just under 2 hours from now, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.